And we're live. Good morning, everybody. I think I've got it working on a couple of different ones today, even Facebook. So happy Sunday. Hope everybody's having a good one today. Looks like we've got Ethologic. I'm just going to call you Ak and D-Day have all joined. Mad shout outs to Mr. Beans and Ethologic for sending some sick merch this week. Cool shirt and cool container, like a resin container, and cool ashtray. The dupe holder. I think it's a dupe holder. It's 3D printed. So yeah, there's a bunch of stuff. A double dupe holder. See, lots of fun things. Well, the resin tray was actually quite cool too. So yeah, appreciate all that. Thank you so much for sending some stuff like that into us. And the shirt will definitely be put to good use. Geordie Craig, and what you gonna do? He's over on the Discord as well. So if you're following us along there, drop us some questions there, or I can see chats off to the side on the monitor. Gypsoy, yeah, nice to see you on the YouTube. So yeah, hit us up on probably Discord, Instagram, or the or Twitch or YouTube. Raining today. It's cold. It's been a cold kind of a season so far. I can't believe that I'm like comfortable wearing a beanie and a zip up hoodie at this time of year, but it is what it is. The Plantheon. It's a bean stash can. Oh, that's why it's shaped like a can. That makes sense. Yeah, see, I didn't even think of that, brother. Yeah, that's cool. So yeah, Plantheon, In the Loop, superb castings from In the Loop. Bill's Superb Greens, the coolest microgreens from the coolest guy. So I mean, that definitely makes them a lot nicer. And of course, Defier. Craig. Yeah, the weather is a bit silly at the moment. Can't seem to decide what it wants to do. Has these random bouts where the temperature's just been getting really low at night. So yeah, some things that prefer the warmer temperatures have been kind of struggling a little bit. Certainly not quite as bad as last year in terms of not torrential downpours, but just annoying, weird temperatures. Have had a couple of hot days here and there, but nothing. I wouldn't say it's been like a regular season, not yet anyway. Oh, your cousin, Frosty Green Trees. Yeah, well, he's a bit of a legend, especially in the HPO community. Yeah, I mean, it's been a cold day. Like I sort of was in the veggie patch earlier, and drizzly rain, cold wind. So yeah, it's not exactly what I would call summery weather. Rocking an Earl Grey tea this morning. Clean living. So questions. Of course, hit us up with questions anywhere. I think I've already mentioned that probably 2 or 3 times this morning. But one that I already got this morning was when you are using the solubles like aquamarine, ocean potion, that sort of stuff, can you just water those through your mulch layer? And yeah, you totally can. Applications of brews and teas, nutrient sort of teas as well. You can apply those just through your mulch. If you're going to top dress though, generally I like to peel the mulch back, top dress, put it back over again, is sort of what I prefer. That way you sort of don't have them kind of joining together and trying to sort of mulch top layer one thing. In the loop is sweating. Yeah. It's just not that way at the moment, man. Like, this is quite comfortable, and there's studio lights in here. So it's it's the way it is today. Yeah, so you want to avoid your mulch kind of pilfering from your top dressings nitrogen, and also kind of breaking it down prematurely. So that's what I prefer to do. Some people might have a different way of going about it. Have a good one, Geordie. And yeah, I agree. It is pretty wild in the loop. But yeah, it's a largish sort of a landmass and fairly diverse in climate. Let me see. Another one here. How important is pHing feed solutions? Look, I mean, in organics, really, it's kind of a bit of a misnomer. I don't like to pH things, especially with certain pH adjusters, after I've added microbes. Those things should minimally affect pH anyway, like certainly antimatter, dark matter, mojo. They don't seem to drastically affect pH. So if you were going to adjust it, I would probably adjust it before adding anything like that. If stuff's wild, like it's way outside range, 8, 9, that sort of stuff, and you're applying that on a regular basis, that's less than optimal. That can cause things to drift upwards or drift downwards. So getting that into a more ideal range is okay. But yeah, sometimes for a lot of people, what they're putting in to adjust the pH is worse for the soil than just kind of leaving it. So Umbra, we've got HPO Umbra on there. Aussie Autos. Hey, Gumby's Deep Water Culture. Cocoa Gardens, Frosty Green Trees. How you doing all? Everybody, this is great. Okay, cool. How important is water quality? Oh, and Warragange too. The epic, incredible Warragange. Water quality is extremely important. There's so much that you can sort of get into on water quality, especially if you're looking at a water-only soil, because your water quality, your water is your main input for the whole crop cycle, say. So it's of pretty big importance, really. A lot of the time for most people, cleaning their water up just looks like simply putting it through a Brita filter. Most municipal water supplies in Australia are pretty good. They do have some things added to them. They will definitely have some chlorine and maybe even some chloramine in them. But it can be dealt with. You know, we're not sort of dealing with Michigan sort of water generally. So yeah, if you're working off dam water or well water, those are particularly dirty. They can have all sorts of minerals in them and kind of be weird pHs and from runoff. So filtration is ultimately the go with them. You can go the RO route, but it's kind of a bit, other people have said it, they're very wasteful. I don't personally think that plants prefer RO water. It's a bit like when you just drink rainwater without minerals in it for a long time, it actually makes you feel kind of dehydrated. And it seems to kind of have that effect on plants. They don't seem to look very vibrant. At least I don't think in organics when they're grown with that kind of water. So yeah, rainwater is what I prefer. That can have impurities in it as well, obviously, because you're collecting it off your roof. There's gutters and all kinds of things. So again, filtration. It doesn't have to be that much more than a Brita filter. So yeah, just something simple like that. But yeah, water quality is definitely very important, both for the health of your soil, but also for just getting optimal results from your garden. Aussie Autos. Sydney water is good. Yep. Outback South. Nice to see you. And Warragange, harvest your rainwater for sure. DB Co. Duck butter. Nice to see you. So yeah, you don't have to necessarily have hospital clean, sterile water to have a happy garden in organics. You want to minimize stuff in your water that's killing microbes, obviously, because you want to have a living soil. So um, stuff that's been put in the water that's designed to kill off microorganisms is probably not ideal to be putting in there. And yeah, chlorine is kind of an essential plant micronutrient or whatever, but I mean, not at the levels that it's present in municipal water supplies. So yeah, you can do without it. The microbes certainly don't need it. So yeah. And Brita filters are good. Yeah, just a good budget choice. You pick them up when you go shopping. You can go further than that. Some hydro shops even sell some good, like 3-stage kind of filter things. That really is about as far as you need to go. You don't need to go to the level of RO for most people, unless your water's just so filthy that you have chemical contamination or just something that necessitates going to that level. And even then, I would look at maybe adding some minerals back in. Just something small, just to help. Yeah, the problem I think, Bill, too, is that a lot of it is in the wrong ratio. So the calcium and magnesium that they add to a lot of municipal water supplies will normally be like a 3-to-1, kind of like a dolomite ratio, which is just not really ideal for your soil. Normally in a carbonate too, so can cause things to kind of drift upwards over time. You can react that out with just organic acids, things like acetic acid or citric acid. And citric, if it's the antioxidant one, so ascorbic acid, I think it is the one that's actually the antioxidant citric, not just plain citric acid, that will actually minimize chlorine as well. It oxidizes it apparently. So yeah, a bit of a twofer there. But yeah, obviously, if you have one input and your goal is to grow water only, you would do best to investigate having the best possible quality of water. I know some people that even just buy their water to use, like they'll just buy spring water and use that. It's an option probably for smaller gardens, though. It's going to not scale very well. As for adding minerals back in, that's actually a good sort of, I like the ocean potion for that. A small amount of it just on a semi-regular basis can sort of charge your water up a bit. You can also get into some like mad hippie stuff on it too, where you talk about sort of energizing water, you know, triskelions and all that sort of stuff. If you kind of believe in that level of woo, I like to think it helps. And yeah, lots of votes in the chat for spring water. So I know one fellow actually that goes on a bit of a trek once a week and collects fresh spring water to use in his garden for the week. Energized water is that water that's been struck by lightning? Not necessarily, no. It's more like kind of Rudolf Steiner kind of level stuff where you get into, if you've looked at applying biodynamic preps, where you're kind of stirring something in a rhythmic fashion for an hour. It's kind of that level of stuff. But triskelions are a thing that people put in water that's supposed to energize it. My phone just sort of did some die thing, so sorry about that. I'm using like a Restream app, so it sort of likes to lock me out on occasion. There we go. We're back in now. Mild pause. We're a gauge, mixing 50 to 60 litres at a time. Yeah, so you'd be coming home with like 50 bottles of water. Definitely, definitely. Defier suggests rainwater through a Stefani filter. $28. Back 9 Bandit. Nice to see you. Yeah, and Aussie Autos makes a good point too. That is one of the benefits of organics, is that because you're not dealing with solute, like soluble based nutrients, the soil feeds your plant. So the actual water itself, the nutrients are not in the water necessarily. Like, yes, you need water in the soil to make them available to the plant, but when you're dealing with salts, it has to be in that pH range for the plants to absorb the proper minerals. So yes, that's a factor in soil. The range is wider, and microbes are generally adept at operating over a vastly wider range than what you would get away with if you were trying to optimize an indoor salt run. Greened out team, wearing your beanie, man. And yeah, 60,000 rainwater, 60,000 litre rainwater tank. That'll about do it. That's probably a pretty decent size for most people, I should imagine. If you're going to get IBC tanks, really try and make sure that they haven't had something funky stored in them, because it's really common. You'll see them a lot around chicken farms. The trouble with that is that they've had antibiotics and things like that stored in them. So it's just, you can wash them out. I just don't trust it. I know it probably doesn't fully soak into it, but I have smelled ones that have been fully cleaned out and they still kind of have a weird smell to them. So who knows? But you can pay a little bit more and get ones that are either pharmaceutical grade. So they've had things like glycerin and things like that in them, or old molasses tanks are a pretty good one as well. You'll find those. It's sort of on Gumtree or whatever. But yeah, make sure that you're not getting IBC tanks that have had weird stuff in them, especially if you're going to use that for medicine and or food garden plants. Oh yeah, and some people are just buying new ones, which yeah, of course that's an option as well. Patrick 66, nice to see you, and Be the Bees, nice to see you as well. There's Alan Garrett off to the side there. Nice to see you. And yeah, concrete rainwater tanks. Yeah, you make a good point. You're going to get a small amount of leaching of limestone into the water, so that's going to give you a bit of calcium over time. Calcium itself is not necessarily so much of a problem. It's more when the magnesium carbonates and things, when you're sort of dealing with town water. Yeah, fish keepers. Yep, that's another one. And I think he's probably referring to the oil in. Sometimes you get olive oil and things like that. Those sort of, they're technically still food grade, right? Because it's olive oil, but it's really hard to get it out of there. It just coats the inside of it and is very resistant to most soaps and things you can kind of put in it. You'd probably have to resort to using lye or something to really like sort of saponify it all and get it right out of there. And you don't really want to be watering your soil with oil all the time. It's not ideal. Patrick, running sub-irrigated planters, yet another one for the SIP gang. So SIP gang unite. Yeah, producing max resin with reses. Canola oil makes a lot of sense because that's used for industrial frying and all the rest of it. So it does make sense, Greened Out Tim, that you would sort of find those for sale. But yeah, just some tips. I mean, if you're gonna try and find that sort of stuff, you want to try and cart the right things home, so you're not poisoning your plants slash self, or just wasting time. Yeah, I actually got a new soil pH pen the other day. I don't generally kind of rely on those things too heavily, but they are good for just getting a kind of idea. Say you've got something and it's kind of like, I'm not sure why this thing's throwing. It's just sort of not happy. Why? What's your problem? And so that's just a good first level diagnostic tool to kind of get an idea of what's going on. Ideally, things should be fine. But yeah, it's sometimes a good thing to check. Outdoor Cannon Ninja. But it's amazing how certain inputs really can affect soil pH. It's also amazing how things like what I was talking about last time with microbe brews, they can they can be actually quite either alkaline or trend towards acidic. So yeah, it's interesting with these things, but the soil itself buffers a lot of that stuff. So you've got to imagine that it's just a bit of a different scenario to an inert media. Soluble based nutrients and everything's kind of dependent on that. There you go. In the Loop reckons that even the new ones have oil in them from the molding process. I mostly had the best luck with ones that had glycerin in them. It was glycerin's water soluble, very easy to clean out of things. And they were what were classified as a pharmaceutical grade. Weren't tremendously expensive, but not the black ones. They were a clear ones, so they're going to last for a few years in the sun, but they're not going to be UV stable. I'd imagine that the plastic that's on them from the molding process, though, is probably going to be some sort of mineral oil, so even worse than canola oil or something like that. That's not great. So regardless of where you get them, wash them anyway. And yeah, having a pretty good Sunday. Yeah, like I was up early, sort of did a couple of things, and then jump on here. I tried to get the cams and stuff happening earlier, but it just didn't happen. So I'm back to the one that I used last week, and yeah, but yeah, gradually, slowly but surely, get it to work. Patrick's still top dressers with the dry amendments. So I think he means Herb Superb and Stone Age. And then just waters in with some of the supplements like antimatter once a week. So that is kind of one of the things with the sub-irrigated planters is they don't offer as much opportunity for drenches. So if you're looking to apply nutrients or boosters via a solution, they're a little bit trickier to kind of plan around. They do really well with top dressings though. So that's kind of something that a lot of people are finding. To that end, auto pots with the fabric style pots in them. I've seen those kits, that kind of size with auto flowering plants and some top dressings in light soil works incredibly effective, especially for some autos. There's some people doing that combination right now that are showing some pretty good results. And it's kind of an out of the box solution as well. Have I done any videos on making worm teas? No, I haven't. I did talk about it on the last live, though, which you can find on the Twitch or on the YouTube. That's where they will live in perpetuity. Kush Bandicoot, nice to see you. It's always trouble when he shows up. And the new internet seems to be interneting itself quite well. At least a little bit better than what the old one was. It seems to be quite variable. It'll sort of be really fast sometimes, and other times it's like average. But overall, I would say it's miles ahead of what we had. So again, we're live and it hasn't died. So this is, yeah, pretty terrific. A couple of people showing me some love for the foily reel. That was a lot of fun. So thanks to it would have been Mason, so Brendan Mason, and Aussie Autos for sending in the door footage that helped us sort of accomplish that video. It was a fun project. Yeah, But I really enjoyed the track for that too. I've been listening just to the track, sort of in the car. It's a banger. Good fun. But yeah, if you want to see some of the stuff that I talked about with brews and all the rest of it, be the bees, you might have to rifle through a bit of me rambling, but I did lay out some stuff last week. I'm favoring a less is more approach to that sort of stuff now when I'm specifically focusing on micro brews. When I'm looking at nutrient drenches, I'm still kind of going pretty much all out, but I kind of see them as two separate things. Even more divergent these days than what I have been in the past. Gnome toes. That's a new one. G'day, mate. But yeah, I'm glad some people like the foily reel. I had that planned like for a long time and then just finally got around to editing it. So not always the quickest, but I get there at the end. There you go, brain. Yeah. So yeah, I think that's what I actually brewed up a wormcast tea this week to feed the pumpkin vine and also these potatoes that are just finishing off. But again, it was very basic. It was just basically, water. I think 2 cups of worm castings, 20 litres of water, half a cup of wheat bran, half a cup of this extremely finely powdered alfalfa that I had. Because like when we make it, we end up with like this sort of extremely fine stuff as well. So I put some of that in there. And a little bit of rock phosphate. So yeah, probably I think it's only about a tablespoon though. And some molasses, 2 tablespoons. So yeah, and ran that. It brewed up quite nicely, and applied it. The plants seem to be responding pretty quickly to it. But it doesn't really need to be much. And I think that the trouble with the more nutrients you get into the tea, the less hospitable that environment tends to be for the microbes. So yeah, I think you kind of seem to need to make a choice on what you're actually trying to do. So if it's for nutrient content, or trying to say get the finest forms of dry amendments into your soil the quickest, that would be kind of a nutrient drench kind of a territory. And then the aeration side of it and all the rest of it kind of is a bit of a moot point. That can just be a convenient way to get that stuff into the water. Whereas a full-on micro brew, I think less ingredients works a little bit better. And, trying to sort of perfect your temperatures, your brew times, and even look towards scoping things ultimately in the long run. How does Kush Bandicoot get a dark matter poster? Oh, dude, I can just send you one of them. But I believe we are actually going to be offering posters soon because people have been asking us about those, which is crazy. But, if we can provide, we shall. So, yeah, I will do some posters. There's some Mojo posters, perhaps, or, the Dark Side of the Moon style one. You can't quite see it fully, but, it's the prism. Jack, how you doing? Like there was good research with kelp meal delaying fungi in compost teas from actually initiating. So Tim Wilson was saying about that. So it's almost a case of it's useful to have it in there for a micronutrient content if that's what you're trying to add. But I mean, you could make the point that maybe kelp meal is better top dressed or mixed into your soil, and that perhaps kelp concentrate would be a better thing to add to a brew / nutrient drench. So it's that kind of like further refinement. As you go along in the world, you find different ways to do things. So. Otto, nice to see you. Yeah, well, I think Surfbud could be credited with starting that trend or whatever of people removing the labels from the products and putting them on the tent wall, which is like even crazier that people do that. But like, thank you so much for doing that. That's super cool every time we see it. But yeah, I mean, we could do some cool posters. Like I did these for like one of the expos, 70s kind of style ones. So there's that. Could put them on some different sort of formats. And if you really like that sort of thing, then we can make that available. But yeah, I suppose it's cool art. And there's some funny puns on some of them. Bruiser, nice to see you. Yeah, so a lot of people repping Surfbud in there. So yeah, I got to give him his flowers for that. Yeah, no, it was the first time I saw it. I was like, wow, it's and now there's like one tent that I basically call the Island Blend Shrine. It's like almost the whole back wall of it is just all Island Blend. Yeah. So yeah, that's cool. Working on some different labels and things like that at the moment too. So that's always fun for me. That's sort of a little bit of the excitement. I get to sort of put my creative hat on. It's in the other room right now. I'm wearing my warm hat at the moment, but my creative hat resides in the other room. And when I put that on, whoa, some things happen. I get that in a pencil. There's all sorts of trouble. So yeah, I think that is a common theme coming up all the time because like everyone wants the results faster with soil. So they're always trying to figure out how to get results quicker. So that, the brews, things like that. One thing that I think people need to realize is that there's only so far you can push it. And sometimes the best thing for your soil / your garden is just kind of to let it chill. I'm not saying neglect your garden, but what I am saying is that being too hyper vigilant sometimes can actually cost you productivity, not actually make it for you. So, I mean, if you're in there and you're kind of brutalizing your plants all the time and poking them and prodding them and tipping them and removing leaves and kind of maybe watering too much and just stuff like that, it's a lot of effort. And that's like, awesome that you're putting in that effort. But at the same time, it's probably sometimes working against you. Yeah, if you're not seeing the results you want to see, you might be doing too much. And sometimes taking a more observant approach to the garden can be a better way of going about it. The other style hat is a top hat, of course. I also have a 40-gallon hat, but I only wear that when I go to shop in town so that I blend in. I've also got a pair of Levi's and some ginghams. Aussie Autos is using auto pots. Yep. Should he be using a thicker layer of mulch? If they're not moistening up to the top, I would actually probably, what I would suggest is take them off the auto pot thing and just give them a good watering. Because what might have happened is that you've sort of achieved some level of hydrophobia in the top level of soil and it's not quite wicking up well enough. So give them, a green supreme watering, say, something around 5 to 10%. You may get a little bit of runoff, apply it slowly, and you'll probably be surprised by how much it actually soaks up. If that's the case, and that's probably why it wasn't wicking all the way up to the top. Try that first. But yeah, I mean, 5 to 10 centimeters is not an incredibly thick mulch layer. So you can certainly go that thick if you're still not getting what you want out of it. But it should ideally be getting moisture up to the top there with how far that kind of normally comes up the container and the amount of water that they apply. So just, maybe just check that. Outdoor didn't top one of his plants enough. Well, that's okay. It'll take off. It'll still get there in the end. Oregon just done side by sides with the Island Blend and the light. Right. And yeah, okay. So he got very similar results, but the ones in the Island Blend were huge. That could actually be, though, the fact that the Island Blend program works more off the solubles. And so they're very immediate. You're applying those more times throughout the crop cycle. It just works better for that blend than the top dressings. The top dressings have ingredients in them that can cause the pH to sort of rise just a little bit. And so that's easier to deal with in a peat-based soil versus a cocoa blend. So it could have been that. It also could have been the oxygen as well. The Island blend does tend to stay pretty well oxygenated. So either way, but the light soil is no slouch. Seeing some really phenomenal growth rates out of that. It's just about dialing your moisture levels in, of course. And yeah, same genetics, so that's cool. And yeah, take them off. So take them out of the autopot rig. They work quite well, but still, I think that's probably what you're seeing is that I tend to find that if you're not getting that wicking from the sub-irrigation all the way up to the top, it might have just gotten a little bit dry. And so, yeah, just give it a top feed. That might actually fix it. Most times it does. They're a little tricky to dial in, those autopots, but they can. I know some people that really like them, and I've used them before. You can get the autopot valve. You can put that in a tray and put a fabric pot in the tray, and that'll work pretty well as long as you can keep it level. Causa, nice to see you. Yeah, so yeah, pretty interesting. But yeah, it makes sense getting back to the light soil V Island blend that they would kind of perform similar because they do have a similar level of nutrition in them. Structurally, they're pretty similar. Just they have a different buffering capacity. So yeah, they work differently, especially with different inputs. Cool. I'm just checking the other messages. Oh, apparently some people are saying that the the camera's a bit better today, so that's good. Yeah, Greened Out team repping mulch. Mulching is important. You should be doing it. Cover crops are not a replacement for mulch. In fact, that's a whole other discussion. But as much as you might think it sort of makes it harder to know when to water, once you kind of get the eye for it, it doesn't really. But what it really does do is keep your soil really nice and active. It stops that top layer of soil from becoming a crust and effectively becoming the mulch layer. So it is kind of an important thing. And most active soils have continual active breakdown going on top of them. So whatever you got to get in there, try and get something clean in there. I know you're probably chucking bricks at me at the moment because I've been out of alpha mulch for a hot minute, but we will have that back soon, actually. So, but I mean, you don't have to use that. There's plenty of things you can use: hay, straw, alfalfa. There's all sorts of different things that you can use. I even used peanut shell on some stuff. I had some left over from a gorilla batch, and I used some of that on some things, and you know what? Seems to work pretty good. So there's choice. I don't really like mineral mulches that much. I really prefer, if I'm going to go that way, I'll just put something that's going to break down. And if you're using something like wood chip, it's not the most ideal thing in the world. Very long lasting. But it's not really going to rob as much from your soil as you might think either, unless you try and start digging that into the soil. If it's just laying on top of it, it's probably pretty okay. So yeah, just try and cover your soil. It's pretty rare to find a really nice active soil that's not covered. And it's cold here, Dank Den. I mean, g'day, how you doing? But I mean, it's cold here, dude. So I'm rugged up. I'm cold. So yeah, Ras Marcus, nice to see you, Dank Den. And yeah, cover crops are awesome, but I feel as though a lot of people misuse cover crops. Cover crops are great for in-between crops. they're great for areas that are too large to practically mulch. So it's much, I mean, obviously, bag of seed expands to an enormous amount of mulch or soil covering. So great for that. But it's kind of a little bit remiss to think that you're getting nutrients from your cover crop. In reality, you'll get that back at the end when that dies, and you kind of either dig that in or lay it on top of the soil and allow that to break down. So the idea with most cover crops in reality is to actually turn them into a mulch / top dressing. So yeah, I mean, the clover's living in your soil, and yes, it's probably fixing nitrogen into its roots for its growth with the rhizobium and all the rest of it. But I mean, it's not necessarily sharing that until it's dead and it becomes part of the decomposition cycle. So that's, I mean, indoors, it makes more sense to me to just use a mulch that's it's at the end of the process, and so it's ready to give up its nutrients. That's what I prefer. And Otto, hurry up with the alpha. Yes, so the first brick. There's one brick. Was there 2 bricks? Three bricks. Okay, great. So 3 bricks. No worries. You guys will definitely go last on the mailing list now. So that's all good. No, I love you all. I'll send you the email. It's all good, man. I can't stay mad at you. And there you go. Yeah. So we actually were competing against some fairly stiff competition there with Warrigange as well. So, you know, and we hung in there. We hung in there. Here's for small companies doing big things, right? Green Hat team likes his sugarcane mulch. I really like it a lot. The trouble with sugarcane is, of course, it's a very like synthetic input heavy industry. So there is that with it, but you know, a lot of that kind of stuff is that way with commercial ag. But generally, sugarcane mulch is quite good, and it's oftentimes you'll find like sections of cane that are just loaded with carbohydrates, so it breaks down very well. What's that? If you send me a I don't actually understand that comment, Kush. I don't get that one. I have to reread that. It must be me. Yeah, and 5 gal pots. I mean, some people are running like 3 gal, 5 gal, and then just using probably a heavier amount of the solubles than what I would be using in something like a larger pot in a full spec grow. So yeah, they're heavy on that, but they're light on media and they can water just willy nilly. So that suits some. It's almost like hydro organics, I guess. So not the most low waste or low maintenance approach, but effective and easy, and they're not worrying about pH or EC, all that sort of stuff like that. Just kind of eventually just gets chucked out the window once you lose the hydro-think mentality. And Dankdan's got 40 litres of mulch, so I mean, you can start auctioning that off if you'd like. But I'm going to wait until you put the auction up, Dankdan, and then I'm going to restock, bro. So I'm sorry. Greened Out team, organic sugarcane mulch. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, that probably needs to be said. All right, off the tee, onto the water. A big old jar of water. Or is it moonshine? You don't know. It's in a mason jar. It could be both. It could be one or the other. Who knows? I guess you'll know if I've drunk a considerable portion of it, and by the end of this I can barely talk. We'll know the answer. There's trades going on now for alpha mulch. You guys are crazy. We will be restocking it. Like, there's the hemp stuff's on the way. It's all good. But I appreciate the interest. I've struck a nerve in the chat. Apparently, I've annoyed some people. I'm sorry. I'm very sorry. I'm just here to chill and hang out with y'all. So yeah, just maybe just settle down a little bit, man. Chill it out. Otto's going to start a riot, apparently. All right. It's like he's making picket signs, apparently, now. This is just turning into a hell of a Sunday. Like, why? If it's not people eating Mojo, it's picket signs over the alpha mulch. Like, the interest is fantastic, but yeah, crazy. Yeah, that looks about like that greened out team. Cali tins of alpha mulch. That is absurd. I don't think that the alpha mulch can be put into caddy tins, I'm afraid. Although it would look cool. Like an alpha mulch caddy tin would be pretty cool. Caspar's Organics, nice to see you. We had you on last week. Skittles cookie mulch. Marcus. Yeah. Well, I mean, I've got a tin sealer, so maybe some other people do too. But no comment. So yeah, and if you've picked up caddy tins lately, thank you. They've some people have been quite enjoying them, and some people have even finished them already and have put various articles in them. So that's fun. Inbox us with those. We repost those on the OnlyFans. Okay, so with the coffee, I have had my usual 10-liter bucket of coffee in the morning, and I've decided that that is probably enough caffeine for at least 5 or 6 hours. So I mean, I enjoy your coffee, Otto. I'm good. I had a lovely Earl Grey tea, which is technically caffeinated, and now I've got this big ass thing of mineral water. So I'm good. I'm good. I'm trying to make it sound less. Yeah, a bit like that. But yeah, make some dank coffee. That's important. And then if you're making coffee, save your coffee grounds too. Trichoderma grows really well on that stuff, and it's a high nitrogen soil food. So just hang on to it. Is it high nitrogen and that's what makes your plants grow so well, or is it the caffeine content? Time will tell. But save it. You can put it in your worm farm too. Some people do that. Maybe the worms produce better if they've had a dose of caffeine. There is actually some studies that say the caffeine has an effect on plants. Try it out. Fresh before frozen still means fresh. Yes, that's correct. That's true. Yep. So yeah, the if you've ever sat coffee ground, I'm not quite sure what it is about them that attracts trikes so easily. But if you've ever sat somewhere for any length of time, it turns green with it rather quickly. Warrigange is off to the Northern Hemisphere in the next couple of weeks. I won't blow up the spot where you're going, but they're apparently letting him into some, sort of legal cultivation facilities and dispose. So that's good. I expect to see headlines on the news at some point shortly after that. Things to the effect of man steals, it manages to consume entire dispensary stockpile in under an hour, or entire production facility converted to auto flowerings after mystery visit. So yeah, that's hella cool, dude. And well, so the hemp herd that we use, the center part, is where the alpha mulch part, the hemp part of the alpha mulch comes from. So they take the hemp off the outside, and then you're left with that inner core, which is very light. It's like almost balsa wood, but very strong. So it's an interesting stuff to use for a mulch because it's resistant to breakdown, but it does eventually break down and seems to be attractive to fungi and a bunch of different things. But it's light. and doesn't really tend to hold a lot of water as well. So yeah, an interesting material, but it was hard for me to get hold of there for a little while. So I ran out of the mulch. But yeah, we've obtained some. Yeah, Aussie tourist cleans dispensary stockpile in under an hour. Deemed public menace, removed from country. Yeah, but I mean, have fun, dude. A lot of people are actually starting to get out and travel around a bit now that it's sort of a bit easier to do so. So that's good to see. Whether it's traveling sort of outside your postcode or whether it's going outside the country. So yeah, some people will be bringing back certainly some epic photos, but some probably more epic stories, which is even more fun. And yeah, shred that stuff up, dude. Get a hold of the stalks and just throw that stuff through a shredder. That would be terrific. Canadians ban Aussie tourists from ever visiting Canada. Yeah, I mean, that could happen. Yeah, see, I wonder you wore a gauge. I knew. Yeah, I knew that they'd be trying to get some auto knowledge off you. It makes sense. I mean, you shred the autos, so of course you're gonna get some phone calls. You're like, "What's up? What are you putting in it? What are you doing with that stuff?" Just go hard in the paint, and then go a little bit harder. You know, like Errol Flynn or something like that. Yeah, there's plenty of great Aussie success stories that way. So don't let us down. But yeah, I fail to see, Dank Den, how shredded hemp stalk mulch is not going to be good. So yeah, get that into them. Have a go at that. And in fact, that would just be a fun afternoon project. If they'll let you do it. I mean, if they'll actually let you come to the farm and do it. I'm not sure what the legalities are. But I mean, if it's just the industrial stuff, surely that's allowed. Yeah, that will probably be the case, Dank. That will probably be the case. But yeah, hoping there's a lot of cool stuff going on in Canada at the moment. There's always cool stuff going on in that corner of the world, but certainly some, yeah, I've seen some exciting stuff, recultivation or rebreeding or that kind of stuff, especially post legalization. And got an interesting setup there because I believe it's federally legal versus the US where it's kind of a hodgepodge, which makes it more difficult to share between states and all the rest of it. So yeah, it's an interesting scenario that they've got going there. Could be a model that Australia could look at eventually once it sort of gets its head around that. There you go. Going skiing. Yeah, yeah, that will be an interesting conversation to have with them, Dank Dan. Just tell them that you want to make some mulch and go from there. That'll be fun. Rightio. I'm going to have a little flick through the book because to my knowledge, there's been no more questions posted. I'll probably stay on until about 12:30 today. How to wet down the seed raising mix, or should you wet it down prior to germinating? You probably should. It's at a level where it's at a nice moisture point, but you sort of should wet that down a little bit further before germinating into it. So how I generally like to do that is I will either, if I'm using like a 1 litre to 3 litre bag of the super starter, I'll just kind of add a bit of water to the bag, seal it closed, shake it around and kind of open it up, check it out, see how it feels. If I'm working from a 20 or a 40 litre bag of it, I'll probably put some in a bucket, add a portion of water to that and or Green Supreme. or and Green Supreme to sort of help wet it down, and then just kind of work that through it a bit until it's at a level where I can squeeze it and barely get a drop out of it, but at about that point, so it's not oversaturated. You shouldn't be able to just wring huge amounts of water out of it, but you should be able to hold it firmly, get a drop or so, and that's at a good point to put into your tubes. Plant your seeds, add a tiny bit more on top to put that in there, sort of settle the seed down, and then wet it in with a misting bottle. Works quite effectively. Nice to see you, Be the Bees. Have a good day. And yeah, a lot of people suffer from what it's a new medical diagnosis called SAS, which is seed acquisition syndrome. So there's some people that suffer heavily from this debilitating disease. Yeah, spare a thought for those that are deep in it. Thoughts and prayers. But yeah, so hard to resist the urge. So much fire, so little time. Catch you later, Dank Dan. We'll see you later, man. But yeah, I would say a lot of people, and I've said this time and again, they kind of overwater their seeds. So they're checking on them all the time, wetting them down too much, and then they end up actually rotting the seeds. So seeds want to come up. You kind of don't really need to overthink that too much. So obviously don't let them dry out. Try and keep them moist and even. I tend to accomplish that by just moistening it down and then keeping something over it that allows a bit of air exchange, but not so much that you're kind of constantly having to re-up the soil moisture. Yeah, that's where I see most people kind of go wrong, is just whether it's keeping the paper towel too wet that they germinate in, or messing with the paper towel too much, checking it all the time, or putting them into soil and then just saturating that way too much. You'll rot them before they even get a chance to start. They just want even moisture to come up. And I am not attacking you, Aussie Autos. That was not directed at anybody in particular. It's just, but I mean, it's just a common theme. And I've done it myself many, many, many times. You just get a bit overexcited sometimes, and it's easy to do. Another way that's kind of adjacent to that people kind of screw up with seeds is just leaving them to soak too long. So if you're going to soak them, don't just kind of leave them chilling in that liquid for too long. Soak them for enough time to soften the seed coat or replenish what you're trying to replenish, but don't really just keep them hanging out in there. They're not water lotus, so you're going to want to get those into some media before they start to do weird things. And 100% greened out team onto the warmth factor as well. Seeds need to be kept warm consistently for them to want to germinate. There can be some fluctuation between day and night temperatures. In fact, some research has shown that that's actually beneficial, that you'll get higher levels of germination. Some even say that that has an influence on sex. How much proof there is of that, I don't know. I do know that you tend to get more males when temperatures are hotter. So whether that's just whether it's cause and effect or whether it's just the luck of the draw. But yeah, that's just something that I've personally witnessed. But yeah, not allowing things to, be kept at a level where they're actually like at germination temperatures is also an issue. To add to that, if you're going to get a heating mat, there are cheaper ones that don't come with thermostats, which is crucially important. So you need a thermostat. Otherwise you don't know what's going on, and you will probably cook your seeds. So if you're going to either get the one that's got the built-in thermostat, or get a heat mat and a thermostat with a soil probe. Don't just YOLO your seeds onto a heat mat with no temperature control and allow them to because it's always going to be plus whatever the ambient air temperature is. So, I mean, if you have a temperature swing one day, it could be a plus to an already high temp, and then you just cook everything. So don't do that. Yeah, and that's why I honestly never really got on with the paper towel method. My way of thinking with that sort of stuff is if they are good, healthy genetics, they're going to come up. I shouldn't need to necessarily baby these things along. I mean, if I've got good quality stock, good quality genetics, they should just want to come up. And so therefore I can put them straight in dirt. That's what I prefer. Other people like to do that 2-stage process. It's a preference thing, really. What I would say is that 2-stage process introduces another opportunity for pests or for, diseases, particularly damping off and whatnot, but also just messing with things. So you're kind of messing with it at a very delicate point in its life cycle, which ideally in nature it would kind of not go through. So that's just I don't like the paper towel method, but if you're going to go that way, of course, you need to keep it moist, not oversaturated. There needs to still be oxygen there as well. And yeah, it works for the people that it works for. It's like a lot of that sort of stuff, like defoliating heavily works for the people that it works for. I'm one of those people that I don't like to do it. But I mean, hey, that's it's important to remember that these things that I share are just opinions and thoughts. I'm no authority on anything. My opinion does not necessarily negate or trump your experiences. So, we can feel free to butt heads or arm wrestle on that kind of thing. And through that, we probably find a middle ground, which is the actual optimal, right? And yeah, 100%. If you're not storing your beans in the fridge or deep freeze or something like that, like they need to be stored cold and stable and dry. A cupboard, a tin somewhere under your bed, none of these are stable temperature / humidity places. So really, you need to look at how they have seed vaults. They're in permafrost, incredibly cold, so cold that it would be really difficult for it to ever warm up. And it's there strategically for that reason, is because you're cold, stable, dry. The more fluctuations your seeds go through, the more variations in humidity and temp, the more that they're going to use up the stored battery that they have in there that's actually going to get them out of the seed coat, and the less and less germination that you're going to have going forward. So if you are one of those people that suffers from SAS and your goal is to actually plant all of the things that you have acquired through your acquisition syndrome, it's imperative that you store those things correctly. Nice to hear that result with the seeds there, Frosty Green Trees. So that was the Green Supreme soak and then rolling it in antimatter, which is if you've got time to do that, I've found that works quite well. It's a great way to really get autos on the jump too, straight out of the container. Critter Candy, nice to see you. And yeah, elevating the heat mat off with rubber. I used to like to put a towel under mine and wash the towel periodically, obviously. But a moist towel is very good at transmitting the heat from the heat mat through to the pots. You could also use a bed of even moistened fine grade perlite, probably work quite well as well. Yeah, and yeah, I mean, dry and temp is good. Colder is better, is what I would suggest. And yeah, I mean, look, some things work for certain people. It's one of those things where there's so much variation in style that what works for somebody is just what works for them oftentimes. The trouble is when you try and generalize very specific advice. So if someone's got a very specific style, it's hard to have that be a general style. So generally obviously a general style can be refined further to person's own taste. That's where, the guides that we've put out they're a guide. You still have to use intuition and knowledge and really just kind of learning about it over time. And you'll probably look at the guide after a while and be like, man, I do that like totally different. But you got to that by sort of having a starting point. So that's kind of more the thing, is you will develop your own style over time. Some people like to remove leaves as part of their style. Unless it's, my opinion is, unless it's something that's going to promote disease or just be straight up useless, then it can probably go. But I'm not a big fan of just hacking off a large amount of just regular leaves for no other reason than trying to get light into areas that are genetically supposed to be shaded. That to me doesn't make a lot of sense. But, you know, I'm sure I'm going to get some ats in the comments about that. But you didn't read. I know, but you know, I have good reason for thinking that. Ganja Mystic, nice to see you. The man, the myth, the legend, Surf Bud. We were actually, your ears must be burning, mate. We were talking about you earlier. Tarek, nice to see you. And dark matter on the seedlings. Yeah, so that's what I like to do. If I'm going to go to that level, I'll soak in green room, roll in antimatter, post-germination once they've got roots on them, then I will dust with data and or drench with dark matter. That's what I like to do. So, you know, antimatter to help kind of prevent the seed from getting any pathogens on it. And once that root cracks, hopefully help it extend its roots really quick. And then dark matter once it's got roots on there to get the propagules of endomycorrhizal fungi in there rather early, so that you can kind of start that association really quickly for when they go into soil later. Yeah, some people are listing their collections in the comments, and there's some of the worst cases of sass that I've ever seen. Like, honestly, folks, like, my heart goes out to you. I pray that you'll, you know, get on top of that one day. Potent Garden, Rhinoceros, and yeah, so there you go. Aussie Autos. So that's my progression that I would sort of use with the products if I was going to use the Green Supreme and a couple of the Grow Biotics. I don't generally tend to start introducing the Rhizo Mojo until the plants are at, say, the second or third node. You can kind of do it before then. It's not going to hurt anything, but I just haven't really noticed any massive effect or benefit of doing it earlier than that. And so it's not a cheap product. Save it for when it's going to be most effective, right? I'm not going to tell you to use it when it doesn't make sense to use it. Kilcan, nice to see you. Happy Sunday. A happy Sunday indeed. Oh, and the incredible Grow Green Daddy is also on there. So yeah, cool. I do notice on the live that I'm coming through like massively potato. So obviously, while the internet connection is better, we need some better tech or something to kind of make this make it a more keto and lower carb stream. But it is still nutritious. So, you know, thanks for bearing with us on that. Louis. And that's correct. I simplify the dark matter to being, you know, basically your mycorrhizal substance for your roots and antimatter for your enzymes. So if you're looking at like nutritional supplements, I suppose dark matter is your probiotic that you take on the regular, and your antimatter is your digestive enzyme. So obviously there's more to it than that, but you know, you could sort of, just looking at it that way, you can go, have food want to break down antimatter, you know, whereas, you know, roots you're trying to populate, dark matter. And that's where the two work in tandem very well. It's a party in the comments. And yeah, some people liking the Spud Cam. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, it's good. Like Pixel Me is a lower res Me. It's kind of almost, from looking at the refeed, it looks like Sega Mega Drive level. So I'm probably about, I think I've gone from 8-bit to 16-bit. I'm going to try and get that up to 24-bit. but we'll see how we go. I mean, I don't know about 64-bit though, but we'll just keep trying to add pixels and just lower the carbs until it's until we've got a nice trim and svelte live stream. Oh, well, thank you, Potent Garden. you you have the misfortune of experiencing both. I did notice that last live stream, though, that the audio quality was a lot better. So obviously the external microphone is a lot better. Thank you, Zoom, for sorting me out with that. It also allows me to record this audio and remix it into songs. So cool. How to beat a biblical fungus gnat problem. Stop sinning for a start. No. Look, man, it's watering, really. It's when you've got organic media, especially if you're top dressing, so then you've got organic breakdown. Gnats are kind of part of the whole carbon cycle. They move in to break down organics. And so what's kind of important to remember with soil, and I've said this many times, is that there's many other things for them to eat in the soil apart from your plant's roots. So when you contrast that with something like an inert media, where the only organic matter to eat is the roots, and oftentimes in those sort of systems, when you're seeing gnats at that level, it's because there's some sort of an oxygen exchange problem, and you've got decaying root matter in there, and that's actually what they're feeding off. So the long and the short of it is modify your watering practices to where you're not saturating things to a point where it's attractive to gnats. If you have a biblical problem with them, I would suggest just ordering some nematodes for it. There's a couple of different mobs that do it online. I don't have any affiliate codes or any people to shout out specifically, but Google is your friend. They are Steiner nematodes that you want. Water those in. That'll normally take care of the infestation, but if you don't modify your watering practices, they're just going to come back. And I would argue that a level of gnats in organic living soil grows is just kind of, as annoying as they are, it's just kind of par for the course. That might not be a popular opinion, but that's just kind of, I have very rarely ever seen an indoor organic soil grow that hasn't had a few gnats buzzing around. They can be minimized by not keeping things overly moist. That'll also minimize things like springtails, which can be equally annoying. But for treating that infestation, you've got probably the nematodes are going to be the most effective way. You could also look at predatory mites, but I tend to find those better after you've got the infestation under control. So that kind of helps you a bit. And 1988, yeah, well, that's good. That's still around good time. Burn City Buds, nice to see you. Oh, we might get to 30. Now, let's not get too carried away. 32 bits, so that's pretty high def. I don't know that we can handle that. Next thing you'll be saying like 240p or something like that, and it'll just be wild. You'll be able to actually see the definition of my eyeballs and things. It'll be too much. And again, mulch. It's harder for things like that to live in mulch. So like the alpha mulch, it helps if you're treating, like I like to apply alpha mulch to a mild infestation, mild to semi-heavy infestation of gnats. The DE and things often help. If I follow that up with the right level of watering, I tend to find that I'm just not really seeing them. That's what I prefer to do. But, some people, when someone's describing a biblical level of gnats, I'm assuming that that's, you open the tent door and there is just like they fly out of there, like Alfred Hitchcock's The Birds or something. So that's right. The nematodes are hyper aggressive, much more aggressive than something like DE could be. A vote there for Bacillus thuringiensis too, but it must be the right type. So the one that they use for killing mosquitoes. Effective, yeah. Beauvaria, also effective, yeah. But the nematodes are what I really have found to be, rapidly effective. One thing about those, though, is they operate best in moist soil, which is not really a surprise when you think about it, because they've evolved to live where gnats live. So, yeah, that's the only caveat. And you're right, Potent Garden, you're right. That's where the most effective treatment for gnats is modification of your watering style. Realistically, that is the most effective treatment. And I always see more of them for the first few days after a top dressing. Once that mulch really starts to break down, they just kind of smell it or something and come from nowhere. But then they also seem to disappear rather quickly. The last top dressing I did on some things, there was a huge amount of mites in there, like predatory mites that kind of seem to come along with that. And like not from the top dressing, probably out of the worm cast. But they, took care of them effectively. I did not, so it was almost a battle between them, and then I didn't really see any little gnats for a little while after that. Sticky traps. Yep. And he doesn't mean Bluetooth dank down. He means Bacillus thuringiensis. It's a fun word to say that. It's even more fun to try and Google it. So good luck with that. There is Beauvaria and Bacillus thuringiensis in the dark matter. So that does have some mild effect on pests, often to the point of, I find it to be a fairly effective remedy on certain things. Works quite well on springtails. And Sweet Baby May has joined us. Many thanks for your help with the video. I shouted you out earlier, but you weren't on here, so you wouldn't have heard that. So yeah, gnats in dirt, not really a big deal. Gnats in rock wool, probably a big deal. Gnats in leca/hydroton, probably a big deal. It depends on what you're using. But it is really difficult to have a living soil environment that does not have things living in it. So that's one of those things. Once you start encouraging organic breakdown, you might be surprised at the level of stuff that, ends up living in your soil. Yep. Some people storing their soil got a manner of different things that are living in there. So yeah, normal. You're supposed to have things living in a living soil. You might have mushrooms spring up out of your soil or something. Normal, totally fine. Unless you notice something going wrong with your plants, chances are it's fine. It's just kind of part of the whole living environment that you have in your particular area. Few weeks, wow. You got some good life going on over there, Aussie Autos. Yep, Sweet Baby Maze is very active as well. So, but I mean, as long as the plants are pumping and as long as everything looks good, there's really not often a need to overthink it too much. That's what I tend to find is part of the issue with organics is sometimes if you've swapped from other cultivation methods, you are breaking a loop where you've been taught that do more, get more. There's a level with that with organic soil grows where it just kind of, you hit a wall and doing more gets you less. So yeah, it's kind of, it applies to watering, it applies to feeding, it applies to applications of microbes, it applies to foliar feeding, all of it really, even IPM sprays, all of that stuff. It is all literally, you can do all of that too much. What you can't do too much is observation. So with that 10 to 15 to 20 to half an hour that you were going to do some stuff to the garden, maybe write some stuff down about the garden, maybe draw some pictures. Humans, by and large, have terrible memories. So you get to a better level of craft by knowing what you've done and mistakes that you've made. So, even just a status check, a quick sort of, what was the relative humidity? What was the temperature? How did the things look? How does the soil look? Don't mess with it too much, but how does it look moist? When was the last time I watered? What pests do I see? All that sort of stuff. And then you'll start to see patterns in cause and effect of different things that you do in your garden that you can potentially modify to get better results. And what you'll probably find over time is that you'll be smarter about what you do. Louis Vuitton. And I'll hear you there, Warriganj. Whitefly is terrible. Albie has also joined. Yeah, not very many people keep. I mean, some people grow diaries. I've seen that as well. But it doesn't have to be. It can be as in-depth or detailed as you like, but it's definitely going to help. And that could be something to do. That's an observation rather than an input. Whitefly are persistent. They can be very problematic too, especially when they swarm all over things. But they're generally pretty easy to kill if you can actually get something onto the little buggers. Ants marching in, taking the eggs in. Oh my lord. Yeah, well, I've seen ants farm scale before. So I think they farm them for the honeydew that they secrete. So it's almost like you almost notice scale because you get ants and that black sooty stuff eventually on the stems, but normally it's just the ants. You'll see them first. Alrighty, cool. Well, I think we've got time for one more, and then I'll catch you for next time. So either hit me up with one, or I'll pick one from the book of HPO for the week, Tales from the Inbox. I'll check all the streams to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Cool. All right. I'll pick one then. Which is hard to do organically. Can't use pesticides. Yeah. See, something like pyrethrum would probably take care of them. It's hard to get just pure pyrethrum, though. You're normally getting pyrethrum and pipironial butoxide or something else along with it. There are different oil sprays you can use. There's different ones that it would smother them or something to that effect. But yeah, they are a bit of a challenge. Horticultural soaps are another one. Just don't mix those things up heavy and really make sure that you're agitating that liquid while you're applying it, or you'll get a lot of burning. Potassium salt soaps are hard on plants anyway. So just, keep that in mind, that they are kind of hard on your cuticle and your leaves, so don't over apply them too often. But yeah, they can help as well. Okay, so Umbra, how long can you keep a pre-made spray or a liquid concentrate in the fridge? So I think, so sometimes people like to mix up like a foliar spray of Green Supreme and use that over a few days. You can do that, or what you can do is you can make liquid concentrates from the Aquamarine, Ocean Potion, Green Supreme for further dilution. About 7 days is about the max that you would want to keep those in the fridge for, and they have to be put into clean water for a start, and also refrigerated. You cannot store these things at room temperature and expect any level of storage from them. They're organic, there's no preservatives, so think of them like food. Once they're combined with water, it's effectively a protein shake. Expect that to go funky unless you keep it at a cold temperature. Also to that, don't try and mix up solutions of the microbes and try and keep those for days on end. You can kind of aerate them and keep them for around 24, maybe 48 in a res. It's not ideal, but you can do that, but they're not going to store well in your fridge, and arguably liquid microbes are dead microbes. So that's why we sell dry powders, because they don't activate until they're put into liquid. Liquids are a convenient way of measuring things out, but not every product can be a liquid product, even if that makes it more convenient to apply. Things like enzymes and microbes are very quickly made useless in water, so they're better offered as a dry formulation. opinions. And yeah, there's a KNF wetting agent. I think it's the Jadam one. That was what Aussie Autos was using the other day to combat some pests. Saponins is what you need. So mild surfactants / soaps. You could use a heavier dose of Green Supreme than 1 gram per litre, so probably go up to around 2 grams per litre. And that'll give you a nice soapy sort of effect if you're trying to treat things. But yeah, so there's a variety of different options, but just that soapy thing will kind of, number one, dislodge a lot of the insects. Number two, it tends to interfere with them pretty heavily. Chili flakes, don't spray down flowering plants with chili preparations, please. And certainly don't use any nicotine sprays on, preferably not at all. Don't do that. But yeah, some people don't use them on flowering plants, please. And yeah, all the Jadam stuff reeks to high heaven, so just be prepared for that. But that's why I'm kind of suggesting that there's a variety of natural surfactants that you can use. You don't just need to use that one. That's just an example of one that people are using, and it does work fairly effectively. And potassium hydroxide is, I believe, you burn bones for that one? Yeah, there was another one. Anyway, potassium hydroxide. But yeah, that's quite caustic, that stuff as well. So just be mindful with that. Very caustic substance. Yeah, a Castile soap. Dr. Bronner's peppermint soap. Like if you're wook like me, you've probably used Bronner's at more than one point in your life. It's great for cleaning your kitchen and stuff like that as well. Just a lovely scented kind of a thing. That, for a lot of people, is just a very effective pest treatment. I try not to allow too much runoff of that into the soil. It's very alkaline. It's a lye-based soap. So yeah, but just something natural to kind of, some essential oils, something with a surfactant, probably about as far as you need to go, unless you've got like some severe infestation. If you've got the Borg, like you've contracted mites, you're probably going to need to be a bit more aggressive on something like that. But I would still caution you against using some of these sprays that are advertised as killing mites in 1 or 2 goes and stuff like that. They might contain some sort of neonicotinoid or something that's just not what you want to be putting near consumables. So really do your due diligence on that stuff with your sprays. You want to know what's in them. You don't want anything systemic. A systemic spray is something that goes into the plant and then effectively makes the plant a poison. So when anything consumes the plant, they ingest the poison. So if, you consume the plant, the half-life of those sort of chemicals too is affected by UV exposure. So they're going to break down. Their half-life is going to be different in an indoor grow scenario than what it would be outdoors under ultraviolet light from the sun. So that's where you really need to be careful with that stuff. And you shouldn't, even for mites, need to go more than essential oils, oil sprays, soap sprays. That really, you should be able to solve it with that. And then even potentially prevent things just through good environmental control and cleanliness from that point forward. And yeah, powdery mildew, that's why the one that they sell, I think it's Eco Fungi or something like that. It's a potassium bicarbonate based one. That just works by changing the leaf surface pH. There's another one, some Australian study found that if you use diluted milk, I've had results with that on cucurbit vines before, but never really seen that produce. I haven't really managed to get it to work well against like flower rot or anything. It is a different sort of a thing though. So, but yeah, citric acid, that'll lower the pH, or, alkaline things will raise it, bicarb. Don't use sodium bicarb though, because you're going to burn your plants with salt. So that's where the potassium bicarb, doesn't necessarily. Dank Panda from Canada. This is a bit Breaking Bad, some of that stuff. Sunners, nice to see you. Yeah, well, holler at me, Dank Panda. We'll see about getting them in there, man. Yeah, run UV in your temp, but still, I mean, any lamp is not going to be what the sun is. I mean, take a par meter out and put it in the sun, and it's going to bounce all off the scale. Especially in Australia, where we've got like a great big hole. It's closing, but we do have a great big hole in the ozone layer above us, just pumping that stuff in here. So yeah, it just changes the breakdown of those things. And you don't want to put systemic, you don't want imidacloprid or any of that kind of stuff in your plants. There's just no need for it. Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, powdery mildew for, milk for powdery mildew, but not for botrytis. So, you know, I've tried these different things, but yeah, even the application of fungicides really is something that's hard, because if you're going to apply those with more water, that's kind of, it's pretty difficult. Yeah, and the sulfur burners and all that sort of stuff are really, they're sketchy. I wouldn't be using those on anything other than veg plants if I were to use those at all. But I just don't see why you shouldn't have endemic pests or conditions that are so unclean that you're getting stuff like that on a regular basis. And if you are, it's probably time to pull things down and just give things a really thorough clean and kind of like, you know, just sort all that out, because you're kind of just putting band-aids on stuff until such time. Eventually all the IPM in the world won't make up for like lack of cleanliness, and just kind of having yourself a tolerance for having those things in the environment. Ideally, you want to sort of, yeah, be not really allowing them to propagate. And that's the best way to stay on top of them. The fastest way is to not allow that to get out of hand, because they multiply exponentially. Again, observation. Leaf on something looked weird the other day. Check it out. There's something living under there. Check it out. Oh, yeah, and UV in the tents. Yeah, that's definitely going to form a down pressure on those sort of things. That's the process for making labs, dank dens. So I would suggest probably just looking up the Chris Trump video. But basically, you harvest the yeasts from the air with the rice water, grow those out with the carbohydrates in the rice water, and then you add those to your milk, which then consume the lactose in the milk, which then changes the pH and causes the fats to curdle out of it. And then you have your lactobacillus serum living in that fluid underneath the kind of casein protein level at the top there. The cheese that kind of you end up with on the top of it, the lacto cheese. That's kind of how it's incredibly easy to make it. And then you can go a step further, and some people say you can do it with molasses, but I mean, realistically, you're supposed to do it with brown sugar, where you can shelf stabilize your lacto. It'll keep for around 6 months in the fridge, but it goes kind of funky a little bit after it goes off. So yeah, you're making it shelf stable by adding enough sugar to where you get sugar precipitate out of the liquid. So you know you've super saturated it. Will put the microbes into dormancy so that then you can reactivate them. I tend to like the shelf stable stuff a bit more anyway, because you're adding a little bit of sugar every time you use it, which for certain things goes quite well. There you go. So Osiotos, the rice collects the bacteria and the milk proliferates it. So there you go. And not burning the hell out of your eyes as well. These LEDs that put out IR and UV at a high level, the switchable ones, switch that off if you're going to work in there. Protect your eyes, protect your skin, because that's identical to its industrial UV light. So probably don't be like, staring into it. It's going to damage your retinas. Yeah, the watery part's what you want. You can save the cheese though. The cheese still has it's got it's a probiotic cheese. I like to eat it. It's great for dogs too. I mean, I'm not a vet or anything like that. So disclaimer, don't do anything I say, and don't take any of my health advice because I'm not a doctor either. But I do, yeah, it's good for your digestion and things. It's along the, say, kombucha, all those fermented kind of things are just good for humans. They tend to also be good for soil. Nice. Well, I mean, unpasteurized might be even better. I haven't personally made it with unpasteurized. Yeah, no, I've used unpasteurized. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't used raw milk, like as in straight out of the dairy, which I thought you might have access to that. There's less molasses content in raw sugar, Aussie Autos, and so the brown sugar tends to work better. It's also like a moister kind of a sugar, so it tends to be more osmotic, if that's the proper word for it. Yeah. Anyway, that's what KNF recommends. That's what I've used. Molasses I've used before, and it didn't seem to do the same job. So yeah, I recommend brown sugar. And when you spill some, you can spill it onto your Wheat Bix or whatever. Yeah, I mean, unpasteurized is probably best, but I mean, I've used a variety of different milks. Most times I would just buy the 3 litre ones that are on sale. And I mean, yeah, you're going to get better results in an unpasteurized organic one. But, you know, a lot of the time, if you're brewing your own lacto, you're doing that for financial reasons. So, yeah, it doesn't have to be the dear stuff. You'll still get like a pretty effective lacto even with the cheap store milk. Even better if it's on sale. You really want to keep it airlocked, as like you just want to keep it anaerobic. Like you don't want to allow, so an airlock, one of those things will allow gases and stuff to exchange, but won't allow other stuff back in. That'll work great. I've done that before. Yeah, so you want to try and keep it the conditions that are right for that bacteria. Oh, just straight unpasteurized milk. Well, I mean, yeah, it's probably going to have some stuff in it, but I mean, ideally, you want to have high proportions of that in your serum, correct? So, well, you probably and I mean, whey protein and casein and things like that have got amino acids, and that is soil food. There's fats in there that are going to break down and also be soil food. So it's not, he's not wrong, but that isn't labs. This is the thing to kind of, I suppose, we're talking about. Yeah, the reason we're discussing that is Tank Den's a dairy farmer, so he should, of all people, have access to it. Yeah, and that's true. It's raw milk is illegal to sell. So yeah, chances are, like, unless you're going to the farm and actually milking it yourself, that's raw milk. But if it's gone through any level of processing, chances are it's not raw anymore. It's unpasteurized is about the best you're going to get. Cool. Well, I think we might call it with that today. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in and watching another live. We hope to do another one again next Sunday. So yeah, hopefully I'll try and improve the bit rate. But until then, yeah, stay cool. Have a great day gardening or doing whatever else you want to get up to, and happy growing.